Hey Eric, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Hey Ken, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about some things today that are near and dear to my heart and that I can relate to, but I would love to hear your backstory first. Maybe where you grew up, what your career has been like, and personal life so far that led you to where you are today.
Yeah. So some of my earliest memories are laying awake on Monday morning in my bed at my house. And it was about 5:30 in the morning. I remember looking at the clock. I was in second or third grade at the time, and I didn't want my mom to come in and wake me up for school because I didn't really like school. I was scared of going to school. I was involved with some bullying. I was on the receiving end of some bullying. And the toughest part of that, I grew up in a small town in Iowa called Pella in the early 80s. And I don't know about you, Ken, but in the early 80s in Iowa, recess kickball was life. Being able to play kickball on the recess playground was a huge thing. And I was told that I was not allowed to play. And I was told that I wasn't allowed to play because I wasn't good enough. Now I look back at pictures of myself then. I was one of the youngest in my class. I was a little bit husky, you could say, rough around the edges. But all I wanted to do was play. I just wanted to play because I knew if I could get that one kick, then everybody'd believe in me and everything would be okay. But when you're told that you can't play, then you end up being on the sidelines. And I remember in third grade making a pact with myself that I was going to be so freaking good at everything that I did that no one would ever not pick me for the rest of my life.
It's
So
crazy.
that was,
No,
yeah.
sorry not to interrupt, but I've seen that pattern with people that have experienced bullying, where a lot of times they become hyperachievers, right? It's like I'm not going to be the guy on the outside of the circle anymore, right?
Yeah, it was so painful to stand there and deal with that. And unfortunately, what that did is it led to, I'm sure, all the things that you've heard before. Nothing was ever good enough for me. So I'm a practicing dentist, and as I was going through school for that, it wasn't good enough in dental school that I was in the top 15 in my class. I had to be in the top 10 in my class. It wasn't good enough that I had my dental degree. I had to get an advanced degree. Once I started running, nothing was good enough through the marathon distance. Triathlon, through the Ironman distance, nothing was good enough in my work. And it just created a perfect storm and a perfect recipe for burnout.
Sure. I mean, it's almost like the definition of not being fulfilled, because it's like you're having success but can't reach fulfillment, right? So it's I don't know. We've always been, and I'm sure in your head, because we've talked about this before on the show, and I've gone through it myself. Is you know, I think those of us, and I think most people are goal oriented, right? It's just more like, is it healthy goal oriented, or is it obsessive? And in the case of, I got into some distance running myself, and a lot of times it's like maybe the first goal is really noble and innocent and nice and kind to yourself. Like, I just want to see if I can do it. Then it's like, I just want to see if I can do 8 minute miles. Then it's, I just want to see if I can, beat the guy next to me. And there's never an end, right? I mean, there's just never an end. And you're always setting a goal only to replace it with another goal, right? There's no time for enjoyment in between.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I found out that was missing. When I got to the end of the finish line of an Ironman triathlon, that was a good time to celebrate, right? That would have been
Sure.
a really good time to say, I've been training 20 hours a week for this long of a period of time. Let's celebrate. I wouldn't let myself do that. I didn't even realize that I wasn't letting myself do that. And since I didn't feel like that was enough, then I almost signed up for a double Ironman. Man, I'm sure glad I didn't. I don't know how I would have finished that thing. I can't believe there's people crazy enough to do that.
Right.
But I bet some of them have a similar story to me. And it wasn't until several years, even after that, that I was going to be doing the Leadville 100 mountain bike race in Leadville, Colorado. And I had been training like crazy for this. I was in ridiculously good shape. We drove out there in a rented RV to Leadville. You know, those rented RVs that it's really inconspicuous, right? Nobody knows that you rented it because it says rent me all across the
Sure.
side. We drove out there, Iowa Flatlanders. We did what you do, right? You drive for 12 hours one day, camp in the RV. The next morning we got up and hiked a 14er. And I was in such good shape that I was hiking with my brothers-in-law, and I got up there before them. I almost ran up the mountain. I was in such good shape. And I remember standing there, and the beauty of the mountain was just incredible. It was amazing. And I looked around, and this thought hit me right in the gut. If you don't know why you're climbing the mountain, you won't find the answer at the top. And to me, that was life-changing because I had been climbing mountains my whole life, and I had no idea why I was doing it, other than now I know it's because I was trying to prove those people that doubted me wrong. But that cured me right there of endurance racing. I didn't need that anymore because I didn't know why I was doing it. And that
Right.
was a super pivotal moment in my life.
It's really funny because people in my life ask me, and I didn't have the same kind of epiphany, but I do remember my last marathon was in New York City, and I ran that a few times. And the whole process of the last one, like the training was, I wasn't into it. I did the bare minimum. Yours was different. Sounds like you peaked and then said, I don't need to do it. Mine was more like, why am I doing this? Like, even when I was training, I'm like, why? I am just not motivated to do this. And I remember running it, and outside the rush that you get, from the crowd, especially at a big race like that, I was just like, I'm not doing this again. I'll finish this one, but I'm not doing it again. Like, there's nothing. I'm not trying to prove anything with it anymore, right? And it sounds like you got there as well, where it's like there's nothing really to gain here. And that level of endurance, that level of, yes, you can get in excellent shape in the training, but some of those races actually, I think, start becoming detrimental at a certain point, right? I mean, that level of training where you're, you know, 75 miles a week, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't think, and I think science is backing this up, there really isn't a lot of health benefit to a 6-hour bike ride every
Right,
single. We're
right.
finding out that we can be super efficient with our workouts. Our bodies love a spike and recover, spike and recover, spike and recover. So we can do that in a short amount of time. I think I probably could do a workout that's more beneficial to my body in about 10 or 15 minutes than what
Sure.
those hour steady state bike rides were. But man, I'd wake up some mornings, and when I was training for Leadville, it was all biking.
Right.
And so 7-hour gravel bike ride week after week after week, when you get up on a Saturday morning and you don't even sleep well Friday night because you're dreading being on a bike on a gravel road for 7 hours, it's time to ask, why am I doing this?
Absolutely. How did that affect your early career? So I understand how it was with, personal life, endurance sports. And those are all things that to me are very natural, right? Because there's competition, there's lots of measurements. What did it look like in your professional life?
Yeah, so I went into dental practice with my father. I was super fortunate that he bought another practice when I graduated school and we merged practices, which was awesome and terrible for me at the same time. I had a patient base from day one, but I was booked out for 6 weeks from day one. I
Okay.
had no onboarding time, no anything. It's here's your schedule on Monday, and you're double booked in a couple places. Like I had been seeing 2 patients a day when I was in dental school, and all of a sudden here we are. And so there was that. And the first time I really knew what burnout was, I was about 6 or 7 years into practice. And at that point, I was buying the practice from my dad. I was building a new clinic for us, and that was all on me. We were a team of about 12 at that point. I was coaching both of my kids in soccer. I was on 5 boards, and I was training for 2 Ironman triathlons. So,
Uh,
yeah, I know exactly. But like the frog that gets put in the water and the heat gets turned up, I didn't add all those things at once. It was,
yeah.
yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. I had only planned to do one Ironman triathlon, but I had made a promise to a buddy that if he signed up, I would do it with him. And he signed up like a week after I signed up for the other one. So that's how I got two. But at that point, you know, I was just not living present in my life. Everywhere I was physically, my mind was in a different place. And it was a tough place to be when you're trying to work in the office and then trying to find 20 hours to train and then every Monday night you have a late board meeting and soccer is these nights and all of that, there's no margin. There's
When you
no time to recover at all. And you just run into the ground.
when you said your mind was always in a different place, because when I've gotten to those points, where my mind usually goes is either to what I didn't get done or what I have to do later, but it's never really in the present moment, right? So it's always, and it's usually, for me, I usually do get done the things I'm supposed to get done, but I'm always worried about the next thing, right? So I'm always like, oh, I'm here with you, but God, if I could get this meeting done 5 minutes early so I could get a jump on this next thing, and then I'm in the next thing, and if I could get done with that early, and listen, I still fall into that sometimes, but does that resonate with you?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole concept of win the now came, because I think we are chronically stuck in the past or worried about the future.
Right.
And when we're in either of those places, we miss the most important thing in life, the one thing that is guaranteed, and that's the moment right in front of us, the moment with our families, the moment in a meeting, the moment on this podcast when we get to have this conversation. If and after this, I get to go speak to 35 middle schoolers about
Right.
leadership. That's my next thing about this. And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
My mind was focused on, if I wasn't prepared and my mind was focused on what I was going to be talking about then I'd be phoning it in for this conversation. It's not fair to you, not fair to the listeners. And a lot of what I did wasn't fair to my family, because when we did actually get some time on the couch at night, guess what I was doing?
Yeah.
I
You're on
was
your
thinking about,
phone. Yeah.
yeah, yep, on my phone, thinking about something else, falling asleep. Oh, dad's asleep again. And it just was, I don't mourn that period of my life, because I think everything that happens in our life, we have opportunities to learn from. There's no way I'm going back there.
Right. I also think there's a season for different things, right? Like I talked to entrepreneurs of pretty much every age and business owners and corporate guys and whatever, but hey, maybe sometimes it's okay to have your foot, the pedal to the metal in your 20s and earn a lot of money and or establish at least the basis of your career, the foundation of it and all of that. The problem is we get into these cycles that don't end, right? Where it's like, well, now what was supposed to be, really this probably, in addition to the bullying that happened when you're a kid, from a professional standpoint, my guess when you got into the practice is, okay, this is a quality problem that I'm overbooked. I mean, who gets to walk into their first practice and be schedule's full? I don't have to go out and hunt for customers or any of that. I'm sort of set. So there's also another part that society says, what are you complaining about? Like, you're making a lot of money, you're doing well, and in your mind it's probably like, well, I'm just doing this for now. And then you fast forward 10 years later, right? Or 15 or whatever it was, and you're still doing it. So where was the epiphany for you? Like, when were you like, wow, the way I'm, obviously you had signs, you had the spot on the mountain when you got to the top that made you kind of realize that maybe endurance racing wasn't the thing for you anymore. But what about professionally, and what about just in life in general? Was there like a key epiphany that you had at a certain point, or did it happen over time?
It happened over time. I started getting some physical signs of burnout. So I had chest pain, heart palpitations, I had some panic attacks, and I just felt like this was the way life was. I
Mm-hmm.
really did. And when you wake up Monday morning and you look at the week and you think there's no way I'm going to be able to get everything done, that's a tough way to start a week. And
Yeah.
I didn't know how to plan. I didn't know how to time block. I didn't have any of these systems and habits in my life at that point. So it actually, I'm a slow learner. I don't know about you, Ken, but I have been a slow learner in the past. So I believe that when we have things that happen in our lives, we can either learn the lessons from those things, or we can be put on a remedial loop where we get to go through that again and try to learn it again. So I had multiple cycles of burnout. I would get it kind of at bay for a little while, but it came to a point pre-COVID where I had just had enough. And I was pretty well realized that what I was doing wasn't sustainable and that probably dentistry wasn't for me anymore. I needed to get out of it. And I had been working so hard on the practice. We were up to 20 on our team at this point. I had two associates, lots of things going on. And my son was graduating high school. And so right before COVID, actually right when it hit, we were supposed to be in Spain. It was going to be this amazing trip for his senior year. We were going to go and stay right on the coast. We were going to go to Tangier and check out some of where the James Bond filming was done. We had all this fun stuff planned. And as we know, Spain was a bad place to be during
Sure.
COVID. So fortunately, that got cut off before we got a chance to leave. But I had something that I had never had before when COVID hit. My office had to be closed for 8 weeks. It's kind of this interesting place to be. We were deemed essential, but we also couldn't be open. So we had to be available for emergencies and stuff like that, but we couldn't have regular scheduled appointments. And so I had discretionary time. I'd never had that before. My day was on the 15-minute all day long. And in some ways, that's a gift to know what you were doing, but it'd become kind of a prison for me. And now I had this discretionary time. The problem was I'd hardly ever been on anything on Zoom before, but now we had all these Zoom webinars. We had all this stuff on infection control, PPP loans, how to, retain your people, do all of this kind of stuff. And I knew that my head was going to explode if I wasn't careful. So that first day that we were off, I made a pact with myself that I was going to spend 30 minutes of quiet every single day that my office was closed. I knew once it was back open, game over for a while. We're going to be so busy, we're not going to know what to do with ourselves. And we were. The first day that I tried to do that 30-minute quiet experiment, I failed miserably. I tried to be quiet, tried to let my head quit spinning, all of these kind of things. I thought, man, we got to be getting close. I looked at my watch. I was 46 seconds into it. And that told me how fast my brain had been moving over the last years.
What were the predominant thoughts? Just again, was it still just like stuff I got to do? Like, what was there a pattern to, when your mind's chattering, like what it was?
It was everything. I have this time. I got to spend time with my family. I got to do stuff with work. When am I going to get these emergency patients in? I got to start looking at this loan stuff. I got to do is just
It's
everything.
always something to do, right?
Yeah. Yep. My business partner and I say it all the time. There is always something. And when there isn't something, get ready because something's coming. But so then the next day, that day I made it through the 30 minutes. It was rough. I didn't consider it a failure. I learned. I knew I had to put some guardrails around things. So I decided I'm not going to judge myself for my mind running. It always runs. I'm going to let it run. But when it runs too far, I'm just going to have a phrase to bring me back. I am here, right now. Probably said it 50 times in the 30 minutes over the next few days.
So you haven't mentioned the word meditation, but that's essentially what you're doing is meditation. And that phrase that you were saying is basically a mantra that's bringing you back, essentially. But it all kind of came organically, it sounds like. But that's really, I mean, have you ever formally looked at meditation or yeah?
Yeah, so I have. I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I've done body scans. I've done some of the different mindfulness and meditation techniques, which I really like. But the key was for me making sure I set a timer on my phone,
Yeah.
put it on do not disturb, and then I got 30 minutes. And the key, and my mentor told me about this, was don't be judgmental with your thoughts.
Right.
If all you're going to be doing is getting mad at the things that you're thinking, then you're going to be mad for 30 minutes and you didn't make any progress. And I just kind of let things wander. I had a journal beside me. The first couple of days I was militant. I was legalistic. There's no way it has to be quiet. I can't do anything else. But then I kind of made a deal with myself. Anything that pops up that I'm like, ooh, I want to remember that. Quick jot it down, go right back to kind of being quiet. And that is really when the idea that, you know what, there might be more than dentistry, and this might be what the more is. And that's when the Win the Now concept hit. That's when I started thinking about doing some coaching and speaking on my burnout journey. And that's kind of when things went. That wasn't the end of my burnout in dentistry. In fact, it actually got worse when we got back, but that was kind of how everything else started.
Yeah, and at least when you went back, even if it got tougher, self-awareness it is there now. Like you can't unsee what you've already seen, right?
Yeah.
So COVID has you guys shut down, and in industry, I'm guessing, and you're out in Idaho or Iowa, I forgot.
Iowa.
Iowa. So you're out in Iowa, and I'm imagining Iowa wasn't completely shut down. I mean, you were never completely shut down as a dentist, but like you said, emergency procedures only. But I'm guessing by the end of 2020, were you like kind of open back up by the end of 2020 or early 21, something like that?
Yeah, so we were only closed for 8 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, fortunately, we didn't have to be closed longer than that. But when we came back, there was the taking people's temperature requirements, and there was, all the new things, the N95 masks and the gowns and all of this stuff that just made it really hard to do what we were doing. And oh, by the way, we have 8 week backlog and all of those things that we had to get back to. So after I got back, I actually talked to my associate at about fall of, I'm trying to think when it was. We were playing golf and it was fall of 2020. And I said to him, hey, I think I want to sell my dental practice. Are you interested in buying it? And he said, yeah, I'm interested in buying it. So we started working towards a scenario where he would buy it and then I would be able to walk away in 2021. So February of 21, our practice broker was supposed to come and iron out the rest of the details. On Monday morning, January 18 of 2021, we were getting ready for our morning huddle to get the day going. I was actually having a flicker of hope that I was going to be able to get out of dentistry, and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself, but I knew I wasn't going to have to deal with this grind burnout anymore, or at least I thought. And then my associate wasn't there at the morning meeting, and called his wife. Long story short, after we didn't get a hold of him, we heard sirens, and he had been in a horrific car accident within a mile of our office on his way to work. It's a miracle that he survived, but as the curtain was pulled back and looked at things, I knew that this was not going to be the solution moving forward. I just knew it was not going to be. And there I was on Monday morning, not my finest part of the week. And all of a sudden, a three dentist practice is a two dentist practice, but we still have the same
And it
amount.
was a practice you thought you were, I mean, you were seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Now, not only are you back in it, but you're back in and more committed than ever, or not committed voluntarily either.
Yep. So I had to step back and decide, okay, what do I really want with this next stage of life? And I learned that I was trying to go around the burnout. I was trying to escape it. I had to smash through that thing. That was the only way. The only way was forward. And so I decided that, okay, maybe just walking away is not the best plan. So I was able to, at that point, start to look for someone who might be a partner in my dental practice. And we'll make a long story short, I've now been with my partner, Jeff, for 2 years, and it's been amazing. I'm now able to see patients 3 days a week in my dental practice. And on the other 2 days, and as you know, Ken, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 days of the week,
Sure.
I end up working on everything that I put under the umbrella of content. So that's anything on social media or coaching or speaking or workshop facilitation, any of those kind of things. And I tell you what, walking away from dentistry would have been the biggest mistake of my life, because I would have been stuck with all the same problems and I would have been without a business at that point.
God, I was in such a similar spot, a little bit different in terms of the workload, but the Leaders Lab, our it's the name of the podcast, but our company is actually Leadership Talent Acquisition. So we place leaders with other companies, and we had a company before this one that I founded when I left corporate America. It did pretty well, but it was small, and I was the business, much like a dentist is, right? If you're not there, patients don't get seen. And if I wasn't there, candidates didn't really get placed, jobs didn't get put on. And that was how I had built it. I had never really looked at alternatives, right? And after a while, at best, I tolerated it. I was not in love with the business. I was not passionate. I liked what we did, and I felt like we genuinely helped people. But for me personally, the level of fulfillment in it wasn't there. But again, all looks great on paper, right? You're making good money, it's a good practice, whatever, good agency. And just like you, COVID hits, and I had much more downtime than you did because recruiting is definitely not essential and everybody stopped hiring, right?
Yes.
So we had months and months, that went by of just like nothing happening. And I think at the beginning it was like, cool, like let's watch some Netflix and chill, I guess, right? But after a while, your brain's like, well, my wife and I even said, well, what do we want to do? I'm like, because I don't like recruiting. I mean, there's no business here right now. Like, there's nothing to even sell until it comes back. So what do we want to do? And I remember even taking real estate courses and things like that, and hey, real estate will bounce back after the pandemic ends. So I'll do that. And then I started thinking about it, much like what was kind of forced onto you through your situation is like, maybe what I have here is pretty darn good, and I'm just not reverse engineering it in a way that's fulfilling for me, right? Like the business was running you before you got your partner, right? And then afterwards it's like, oh, there's a way to actually have my cake and eat it too, right? I can have this practice, I can still have outside endeavors, which makes me actually like serving my patients, right? Because it's not a gun to my head every day that says I have to see 20 of them or whatever. And it was the same thing with us. And so we rebranded it. A huge part of that was bringing my wife into the business. And she'd always been kind of involved, but on the outside, not really as a partner, and bringing her in. And yeah, complete game changer. But sometimes we need those long pauses to just go, what am I actually doing? I mean, race cars take pit stops. You know what I mean? Like, why don't we? I mean, and a vacation where you take a week off, but you're dealing with kids or you're, super scheduled, or back in the day, I used to just get drunk. I mean, or whatever. It's like, that's not a true pause, right? That's not really where mindfulness is going to sink in.
For sure. And I think what happens, and I'm sure you experience this as well, a week vacation is amazing, but we don't get many of those.
Right.
We might get a couple of those. And when I was full on burned out, it would take me about 5 days into the vacation where I would start to uncork a little bit. And the problem with that is I'd show up and my mind was so wired this way. I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, we only have 6 more days here. Oh, we only have 5 more days here. And I
Yeah.
would almost count that down the whole time. So one thing I like to talk to people about is, hey, while it's great to have those 1 week vacations, it's great to, my wife and I love to go to Utah. We love to spend time out there, hike, ski, do whatever. But we can't go there every week. We can't even go there every month. So we have to look at what are the things that we can do on a week by week basis to get ourselves filled back up. What are the
Right.
things we can do on a daily basis? Because if we can get that right, then we're still going to love the vacations, but we're not going to need them as much. It's not
Right.
like we're going to coast into them on fumes.
Right, because you're not coming into it just completely blown out. You're coming into it going, oh, I could use a little R&R, but 2 or 3 days might do it instead of 2 or 3 weeks, right? To get you to decompress. What So talk to me about when the now and in this path, like when did the desire to kind of flip it and go, okay, I think I've discovered something in myself, and I think there's probably other people wired the same way. I mean, is there a way to give back? And when did that come in?
Yeah, so that would have been shortly after we came back from COVID. And faith is super important to me. That's a big part of my life. I actually have a room that I had built in the basement of our office. It's just 4 by 8. It's got a chair in there and an ottoman and a little lamp, and that's all, and a journal, and that's all it's got. And so I will sit in there sometimes at lunch when I just need to decompress a little bit over lunch, just sitting there in quiet, maybe journal, pray, be quiet, whatever. And that was super important when we came back from COVID because it was so crazy and so busy. I just needed that bit of a sanctuary. So I started thinking, I'm really enjoying this journaling. I'm enjoying writing. What might I start writing about? And I thought about, I really like some John Gordon's positive leadership messaging. And so he talks about how hard it is for him to be positive. He's a natural negative person. I felt, boy, I'm the same way. So I'm always talking about my losses. I'd get home at the end of the day. My wife would say, how was your day? Oh, this happened. Oh, this happened. Oh, this happened. I said, how can I flip the script on that? So I thought, well, I'd like to find more wins in my day. Okay. Well, I started looking and, win the day, that's a busy space. A lot of people talk about that. And I thought, okay, a day is too big for me to measure. I see too many patients in a day. I have too many things going on that if I'm going to reduce my day to the least common denominator, it's always going to look like a loss. So, okay, and then I was sitting there in quiet one day and the phrase win the now popped into my head. I thought, oh, win the now, what does that mean? Okay, what does a now look like? For me, in my life, a now looks like a 15-minute slot of time. That's how my schedules work. Sometimes I have one slot, sometimes I have 3 slots, 5, 6, however long the procedure needs to be. And I might also have a hygiene check that I have to do. So go do an exam for one of my hygienist patients. Okay, great. Those are some of the nows that I have. When I get home, a now is going to be when I'm sitting at the dinner table with my wife or my wife and my kids. Right now, the now is this podcast, this hour that we're taking to record the podcast. So then I look in each of those moments and what does a win look like? A win in a patient interaction looks like a good conversation. It looks like maybe we get someone who's anxious calm down a little bit before we do the procedure. Maybe it's getting a procedure done that's painless and it goes exactly how we want it to be. A win around the dinner table looks like I'm not distracted on my phone. We're engaged in good conversation. I'm asking good questions and listening well. And then the reality is in the middle of that, we're going to take some losses. Sometimes dentistry doesn't work out exactly how we planned on a procedure, and that can feel like a loss. So I always carry a piece of paper with me that I make some notes throughout the day, and I'll just jot down that loss. And then when I have time to go back to it, I'll just ask one question of that loss. What can I learn from it? And if I can learn something from that, all of a sudden the loss becomes a win. And then we start stacking wins on top of each other. And instead of the day looking like a lot of losses, it starts to look like a lot of wins and a few lessons that we learn. So now I come home at the end of the day and my wife says, how was your day? I'm much more likely to answer favorably. I'll also share the bad things that happen, but those aren't the things that bubble to the surface as much.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny when you said you were wired negatively and that mentor of yours was wired negative. And I'm like, I think we're all wired negatively when you think about it. And it doesn't mean that's how people spend their whole day. I just mean like left to our own devices, I think that's what we do. When we're filling in the blanks, we just fill them in with the worst thing usually, right? That client didn't call. Oh, it must be because they're not interested. The girl I like didn't call me back. Must be because she's not interested. Whatever, and I think when there's missing information, we usually fill it in a negative way. And I think that is also based on this idea of expectations that we can't control, right? So a lot of it to me too is a loss really a loss if, like you're saying, we learned something from it, and did we show up the best we could? Did I do the best I could? I mean, I'm not going to win everything, right? So, but I think it does take work. I mean, I think it first takes self-awareness, which you were sort of gifted through your experiences, and then it takes practice. I mean, I think we literally have to rewire ourselves into positivity, and I think even when we know that, under stress, under duration, I'll still catch myself going back there, and I'll go, oh, what am I doing? What am I complaining about? Why am I in this, in this loop again? So, awesome. And so did you know as you started going, okay, this is working for me, I'd like to share it with other people? Was that kind of part of it as you were sitting down, having your journaling moments and time to yourself?
Yeah, so I was talking to my practice management consultant in July after we come back in May, and he said, "Hey, how are things going? This is what I'm hearing from some of my other clients." And I said, "Matt, I am just getting pulverized by the false sense of urgency." And he said, "Wait a minute, what is a false sense of urgency?" And at that point, I that's another term that just came to me, but what that means to me now, and I know it a whole lot better now, but I felt like I couldn't sit still. False sense of urgency. Now I see it as a background app that's constantly running in the back of our brain. So we have apps on our phones all the time. This is one that's running in the back of our brain that's really tough to shut off. It tells us that we have to be doing more. We have to be doing better. We certainly can't rest because there's things to be done. It keeps our mind spinning. It's all of those kinds of things. And I explained it to him, and he said, well, I think you should write a book about that. And I thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. So I sat down and started writing. And that after I got off the phone with him, and I think I wrote 4 chapters that first day. That was really when my beginning of my writing journey really took off. And within a year, that book was published and released. So the book is called The False Sense of Urgency and How to Win the Now. So the antidote to the false sense of urgency is being in the present moment.
For sure.
The false sense of urgency deals with the word should all the time. And as my dad told me when I was growing up, never should on yourself. It gets messy. So the false sense of urgency, I think we all have it right now. Why would we not have it when we're scrolling through 50 things in a minute? How would we not have it with the speed at which we're living our lives? How would we not have it when it used to be we would pull up to a stoplight in our car and there was nothing else we could do? We might have music on, but we just kind of look around.
Right.
We have 10 seconds now. The phone's out. We're distracted. We're in la la land. And all of a sudden, we're getting more urgent and more fast and more negative and more anxious. So it's really a problem that I think I would call it an epidemic.
Yeah, we're sort of wired for constant stimulation and feedback and response. Constant, right? I mean, to your point, I mean, it's rare that I'll go anywhere without my phone. I mean, there's some classes I'll take and so now I do have a discipline where I'll at least put it down. I'll make it do a face plant where I can't even see the screen sometimes, right? Because I'm like, no, I'm here right now, but it's still there if I want it, right? Like I'm not completely like leaving it in the car or at home or whatever. So as you started getting more into coaching and stuff, did you focus on, dentists and doctors and stuff like that, or did you? I mean, or was the book the first thing, and then from that you kind of felt like you could, coach any professionals that were in the same boat, or what direction did you go in?
Yeah, the book was the first step. And from there, it opened up some opportunities to speak to groups about some of my experiences with burnout. And that is really my favorite thing to do, is to do small group workshops on burnout. And actually, book 2 is going to be coming out April 12th, and it's called That Damn Analogy. And this is my favorite thing to teach on. So really what we are, Ken, is we're like a dam. So if you've ever seen a dam as it's working, there's a lake on one side, and then there's a river on the other side. And so all we're doing as the dam is we are controlling the flow of energy that goes through our bodies. That's all we're doing. And we're really good, especially high achievers, we're really good at the outflow part. As you said earlier, we're going to get stuff done. There's no doubt about it. We're going to sacrifice whatever we have to do to get things done. We're really not very good about the inflow part. We're just not. We don't take very good care of ourselves. We eat terrible. We sacrifice sleep to screens. We do all of these things. They're not complicated things, but we do them. And so that's one of my favorite things to teach on, is we get together for about a 3-hour group, 3-hour workshop, and we go through what the damn analogy means and how can we incorporate that into our lives so we're not walking around feeling burnt out all the time.
Are you having to, because of your experiences and what your tendencies were before, to always be busy and always be going and always be, striving and achieving, and now you're on this new, not complete, well, yeah, kind of new. I mean, new in that you've got the freedom of, you don't have to be at the dental practice, 70 hours a week or whatever. You have this free time where you get to do something that you're passionate about. But I'm guessing at times you probably got to put guardrails around the passion stuff too, to make sure that, hey, you could be back in the same boat. You just might like what you're doing better, but there's still family. There's still taking care of yourself. There's still all those things. Did you develop a system for yourself? I mean, because you mentioned earlier, like you weren't great at time blocking, calendar blocking. I'm guessing through this, because to me, the only way to be present is actually to be scheduled in a way that allows me to be present. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I'm just worried about like what I'm not doing or what I have to do. But if it's sort of like, no, it's all handled, I can just be here right now. But what did you learn about that? And is it tricky sometimes, you know, when you're involved in something new like this, that instead of doing it out of force, you're doing it out of love, but it still comes with a time commitment.
Yeah, your question could not be more timely,
Yeah.
because the book is releasing very soon. So this is a different way than I wrote the first one. I'm self-publishing on Amazon KDP with a publisher. But oh man, I way overshot. So I have an event coming up and then a book launch at the end of that day. And there's been so much planning and so much work that's had to be done and so many phone calls and things with my launch team and all of that kind of stuff. I way overshot it. The last couple of weeks have been brutal for me. In fact, to the point that I caught my wife right when she woke up last week. And she just coming out of the bedroom ready to grab a cup of coffee, and I hit her with all these things that were going on. And she said, "I'm not awake, but we need to talk about this." And so I had noticed that my guardrails that I thought I had on there weren't really made of steel. They were maybe made of rubber because I was kind of pushing off on the ends a little bit. So we actually have a time scheduled in a couple of weeks where we are going to head out to Utah just for a few days. And we are going to get clear on what we want the next season of life to look like.
Sure.
Because I overshot it again. And it's
Yeah.
something that I always have to be conscious of. I'm not one of these people who's got it figured out. And so I'm just this expert and can speak to everybody on it. That's part of the beauty of the journey. You know, we're going up for a little bit and then we take a dip and then we learn from that dip. And next time when the dip tries to come, I'll be more ready for it because I will have remembered what happened at this point.
No, and I'm asking because I've done the same thing. You know, I've defied sometimes my own logic. I'm like, how did I end up here, right? And I remember using the term a lot because I do think it makes sense if you can live within it. Is sometimes we're going to be intentionally out of balance for a period of time. A book launch would be a great reason to be intentionally out of balance. A relative at death's doorstep and having to spend time with them might cause us to be intentionally out of balance. But it's getting back, right? It's not that we're always going to be in this perfect alignment and balance of all these areas of our lives. I think it's a recognition and a system of, okay, the ball has dropped too low in this area, or I'm spending too much time in this other area. So really, really cool and excited to see your new book when it comes out. I will do my best. We'll try to release this episode very close to your release date. And we'll put all the ways to get your book and get in contact with you. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with before you go?
Yeah, I would just say that one of the reasons I was able to get through this period of time is because I had great people in my life. I have a wife who I'm in a good enough relationship with so that she can call me out on my BS and she can say, "Hey, we overshot it. We got to get back on track with this." And so I have an inner circle group of people that I can call my 2 a.m. friends. And I would just encourage you, if you're struggling, if you think you're on the burnout scale, raise your hand. It's okay. Don't try to walk this journey on your own. We need other people in our lives who can speak truth into our lives. And if you do feel like you're starting out on that burnout journey, or maybe you're way far gone in the burnout journey, I have a free 5-day challenge on my website, just at ericrecker.com. You can put your email in there and you'll get a series of 5 emails, some steps to help knock back the hold of burnout on your life. So if we don't raise our hand and admit that there's a problem, then there's always just going to be a problem.
Totally. Nothing's going to change if we don't do something about it. Well, I appreciate you being on. Really, really great insights and advice today. And it was really great to get to know you. Congrats on the new book. And, hopefully our paths will cross again soon.
I sure hope so. Thanks for having me, Ken.
All right. Thank you.